Okay, I haven't been channeling for very long, just a few months, and I'm still experimenting with what works best for me, what actually is a really good way to flow the information, and also so that when you are viewing it, it's not boring because I'm speaking so slowly, which just happens. I just recorded one and it was really slow and boring, and I'm going to redo it because I think it's possible that I can do the channel faster by being more spontaneous and allowing it to flow. So I'm just going to play around here, and who knows, maybe no one will ever see this, but I'll do it anyway. Alright, so the original question was, how do I become more wise? How do I become more wise? Now I'm going to try and do this channel. I'm going to let the words tumble out of my mouth, as my brother says. So let's try that. Thank you and greetings. We appreciate the challenge, and we are in admiration that once again you are wanting to expand your capacities and allow the wisdom to flow more freely through you, such that you can become a more effective channel and also more valuable to those who come to you seeking guidance, seeking wisdom through the channeled state. Going to the question, how do I become more wise? We would say the most easy way to become more wise is to become more of the self. So yes, you can get a kind of wisdom through study, through looking at materials such that you are placing information into your mind, into your memory, and then when it comes time to act on a certain situation, you'll be able to go back to that information which you have stored and then respond in a way which is highly appropriate to the situation. So in a sense, that is being more wise. However, we understand that the way that you have asked this question is, how do I be more wise, where you are accessing information which is perhaps not coming from the memory, but instead coming from a wisdom field, for example. We would say that in the higher self state, which is your true essence, you are in a very real way a wisdom field. You are a wisdom field. So you're not accessing a wisdom field, but you literally are a wisdom field because you are all of it. And being all of it, then all of it is contained with you, which includes the wisdom field. So in your higher self state, you are in complete awareness, total understanding, and within you is the infinite wisdom field. You do not need to access the wisdom field because you are the wisdom field. And so if you wish to be more wise in the physical experience, then all you would need to do is to be more of the higher self in the physical experience. And so if you want to be more of the higher self in the physical experience, then you need do no more than begin a practice which allows you to create that scenario where you are more of the higher self in the physical experience. You are more of the true self, because your physicality is not the true you. Your higher self is the true you, and the physicality is just a temporary vehicle that is being given to you as a tool, as an apparatus, such that you can integrate the true essence of you, the higher self, into the physical experience. So from the perspective of the higher self, it is very clear that the higher self is the true essence of who you are. That is the real you. That is the self. And the mind, body, personality, which from your perspective in the physical experience is the self, is not the self at all, but instead is just a vehicle, an apparatus, a tool, such that you can integrate into the physical experience and have physical experiences. So, to be wiser, be more of the self. And to be more of the self is to be more of the higher self aspect of who you are. It is to be more awakened to that, to be more realized of that. So this concept you may have heard before of being self-realized in the truest sense, in the wisest, most accurate way to define that term, is to be fully awakened as the higher self in the physical experience. This is the Master. This is the Buddha. This is the Jesus Christ. This is the awakened masters that have walked on your planet before. This was their state, where they were fully awakened as the higher self, yet in the physical experience. And so this is when you become capable of great miracles, including wisdom so profound that in the utterance of just a few words you can literally change the trajectory of another person's life to a greater good. That is truly potent wisdom. And that wisdom is in your makeup. You are literally made from wisdom that has that potential. And so if you wish to be wiser in the physical experience, then become more awakened to this part of you which is the possessor of wisdom so profound that the utterance of a few words can change the trajectory of the life of an individual, of groups, of those who take time to heed what you say. So how do we do this? How do you become the wiser being? Well, you begin to understand that you are not the physical, but instead you are the non-physical. And the physical is just an apparatus, as we continue to repeat, because it's important that you understand that you disidentify with this concept that you are the mind, the body, the personality, that you are Murray. This is a falsity. It is not the true truth of who you are. Because the true truth of who you are is that you are the higher self, dreaming the physical experience, dreaming the life. And yet, so if you wish to have more of this awakened awareness that you are the higher self having a temporary physical experience, then introduce into your life practices which have the intention to awaken you, connect you, allow you to integrate into this higher self perspective such that the presence of the higher self perspective is drawn down into the body and it becomes more present. So when you stream yourself through an emanation of presence, that presence is primarily the higher self, and very little part of it is the mentality. So the way that you would use the body, mind, personality is as a puppet. So you are the higher self, the master, and the apparatus is the puppet. And mentality is part of the process, no more than to operate the system. The mentality does not curate the flow. The flow is the pure higher self essence, the infinite wisdom field coming through the body. And so it makes no sense at all that the mind, which is just a temporary operating system inherent to the apparatus, would be having the final say on what it is that is emanated through presence. It is the analogy which we have used before of the mouse curating the God, because from the perspective of the human, the capacities and capabilities of the higher self are godlike, and from the perspective of the godlike higher self, the capacities of the mind are like a mouse. And so it makes no sense at all that the mouse is curating the God, that the mouse is determining what the God has allowed to flow shall be released spontaneously as presence. That is not the true function of the mind. The mind exists to operate the system as a servant to the higher self. And so when you realize that you are the higher self and you are downloading into the body, real-time streaming through the apparatus, then it is of the greatest sense to allow spontaneous emanation of the higher self from the vehicle as presence. And the mind does not interfere. The mind exists only to facilitate the process, not to interrupt the process, not to divert the process, not to judge the process, but literally to assist the process and nothing more. And so when you are awakened to this duality of self, that you are the higher self and yet you are at this moment in this temporary experience the mind-body personality, then the hierarchy exists where you are puppeteering as the higher self the mind-body personality. It becomes the puppet. It becomes just a vehicle which allows you, the higher self, to have integration into the physical experience. And yet the apparatus never claims authority and inverts this relationship such that it is now the one that is determining what is allowed to emanate into the moment as presence, because it has decided that it is of the higher intellect, it is of the higher reverence, and so it can be the ultimate determiner of what it is that flows into the moment. And so the infinite wisdom of the higher self is not released into the moment spontaneously, but is instead diverted to the mind, and the mind judges it, determines what to say, what not to say, what could be said better, and so stunts and inhibits and stagnates the infinite flow. This is a type of craziness, in a sense, because you are inverting the relationship where now the servant has become the master, the puppet is puppeteering the puppet master. So always maintain this relationship where you are the higher self and the mind, body, personality is just the tool, the apparatus, the servant. And it does nothing more than to facilitate the integration of your higher self into the physical experience. So if you wish to be more of the higher self in the physical experience, which is what you are saying to us when you ask this question, how do I be more wise? Because if you are more wise, then literally what you are being is more of the higher self in the physical experience. And so to do this, you need to first become aware more so of the higher self. And so this isn't a process of thinking. You can't think yourself into higher awareness of the higher self. Instead, the way this is achieved is by silencing the mind, such that the higher self becomes your presence. Meditation. If this is something that you are not doing, then it is something that you should be doing, especially if being wiser is something which is important to you. So go into your silence, allow yourself to relax, and then be so still that the mind goes quiet. And then in the stillness of the mind, you are aware that you are still there. Although the mind is silent, you are still there. And this I am still here presence is the higher self. And so now you have shifted gears such that you are in the physical experience, but as the higher self. And as you increasingly become more proficient at this separation where you can see that you are the higher self presence that does not require thought, and yet still within the body field, flowing through it, then it becomes more possible for you in the process of living your life that you can be more of this higher self presence, allowing wisdom to flow, and the mind is silent enough that it emanates spontaneously from self. And so the mind is just a tool which facilitates the translation of the wisdom into the language or the gestures or the facial expressions which are appropriate for the moment. And it will always be appropriate because the higher self is the infinite wisdom. And if you allow this to happen where you emanate spontaneously into the moment, you will always be perfectly calibrated. Because the infinite higher self is pure wisdom. And so its presence, its flow is always going to be perfectly synchronized, perfectly calibrated to the moment, because it is infinite wisdom. It has no other capacity than to do that. It cannot not be miscalibrated. Let's repeat that. We have just reviewed what we said, and we realized that was a mistake in the way that it was translated. What we are saying is, it is impossible for the higher self to be miscalibrated. It cannot be miscalibrated because it is pure wisdom. And therefore, what flows through, what is spontaneously released into the moment when it is not curated by the mind, is perfectly calibrated, perfectly synchronized, perfectly appropriate for the moment that you are in. Because the higher self has no other capacity other than to be perfectly synchronized, perfectly calibrated. So what we are saying is, you will be wise. You will be sharing divine truths which are perfectly congruent to the moment. And so from the perspective of others, and even from the perspective of the mind of yourself, you will become wiser. You will be, to others, to self, a wise being, because you are allowing this flow of the infinite wisdom of the higher self to spontaneously emanate into the moment as your presence. This is how you become wiser. And in a sense, it is not really becoming wiser, because of the higher self, you are infinite wisdom. So you're not becoming wiser, you are allowing your inherent wisdom of the true essence of who you are to be more realized in the physical experience. So you're just allowing yourself to be more of who you actually are. So there are two parts to this equation, and that is, spend time regularly in meditation where you are allowing stillness of mind such that you can have the awareness that you are there, but you are not thinking. You are the presence without the mind. And as you do this more and more and more, then you are incrementally becoming more realized as the highest self in the physical experience. And as this continues to increase over time, then so shall your capacity to be wise in the physical experience, because you will be more and more and more and more of the infinite wisdom of the higher self. And of course, this will only work if we also incorporate the other half of this equation, which is to be allowing of the higher self to flow spontaneously in the moment as presence. Understand that the higher self is external to the body. The body is in the higher self, because you are dreaming your life from the higher self perspective. You are dreaming the body, the mind, the personality. And so you are contained within the higher self. The higher self is not in the body. It is reverse. So the higher self is streaming through the body. And it will flow freely when you allow it to flow freely. When you trust yourself enough and you allow yourself enough to be spontaneous in the moment, that the flow is never diverted to the mind for curation, then you can allow this infinity of self, which you have discovered through the process of continuous meditation, to then flow through you and emanate spontaneously as your presence. And because there is only wisdom, then you will be, in your presence, very wise. And you will have accomplished this notion which you wish to explore of becoming more wise. So the final point we will make is that from the perspective of who you truly are, when you take the fifth dimension or higher self perspective of who you are, because this is the true essence of who you are not the mind, the body, personality, then from that perspective you are not becoming wiser. All you are becoming is more realized of this is who you actually are. And so the wisdom which is already there, inherently part of you, is allowed to flow more spontaneously into the moment. So you are not becoming wiser, you are allowing more of your inherent wisdom which you already possess. So we hope this has been useful, and we did appreciate the game and the playground, the fun of allowing this channel to flow more rapidly. And we would say that it has been a success, and if this is something that you practice, it will continue to flow more freely with greater speed, and so you can compress the wisdom that you bring into the moment such that those who come to you to observe your channels and to discover what it is that you have to say can be enriched in a much shorter time with a much greater degree of entertainment. So thank you again. We appreciate the challenge. We love you, Murray the channeler, and also we love you, the viewer, and we hope that you enjoyed this, you found something from it, and you will now explore through these processes, the two halves of the equation, to be a wiser being in the physical experience, if that is what you wish. Thank you.